Who are the most underrated guys in fantasy football right now? Lauren and I are going to go through every position on today's show and let you know who you should be watching closely as we approach the 2021 season. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of 2-Point Stance. I am Dave Kluge and I'm here with Lauren Carpenter. Be sure to subscribe to the Football Guys YouTube page at youtube.com/footballguystv. And remember, we are live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on Twitter. And then you can catch the YouTube replay at 7 p.m. Eastern. So, Lauren, we've got a lot to talk about today. And I'm thrilled about this show because we get to talk about our guys, the people that we are excited about. So this should be a fun one. And let's start with quarterbacks and who you think some of the most overlooked guys are at the quarterback position. So, Lauren, we'll start with you. Who is your favorite quarterback value right now?
Okay, so I had a few here that I definitely could have plugged in, but I'll go ahead and just stick with one. Hit me up on Twitter at StepMomLauren if you want to find out who my other guys were. But I love Ryan Fitzpatrick this year. Not only do I just love him anyway, because he's fantastic and he's super fun to watch and he just does not care anymore. I love him as a person. And plus his post-game press conferences are amazing.
Did you see his flex video this morning where he was walking out onto the practice field and there was a cameraman there and he just looked at the camera and just like grimace and then flexes as he's walking out to the field?
Oh my gosh. Our boy Troy had a comment on that too. Yeah. Oh my God. He's amazing. I absolutely love him. But I really like his new position where he's at with the Washington football team. The Washington football team. That's a new thing now. I'm gonna trademark that. No, I'm kidding. I'm not gonna do that. But I've seen him go behind like guys like Ryan Tannehill, who we've talked about before. Maybe some passing regression. Who knows? He's even behind. Like when I say behind, I mean ranked behind guys like Daniel Jones. Like really, give me Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you can get him late, which we love value. We love that. He's got some awesome weapons around him too. Sorry, I swear I know how to speak English, even though it may not sound like it today. Bear with me. But he has Antonio Gibson, who I love this year as well. Terry McLaurin, who can make it happen no matter who is throwing him the football. And also Logan Thomas, who is a favorite of mine at tight end. So keep your eyes on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I am really excited about him this year.
You didn't even mention one of my favorite guys. They brought in Curtis Samuel. And
that's right. Yeah.
Also a great addition to that team. I'm with you. Ryan Fitzpatrick, we've seen it, early on in his career. We knew about the Fitz magic and the Fitz tragic, but we've seen a lot more of the Fitz magic lately. He looked great in Miami last year, and now he's surrounded with some incredible playmakers in Washington. So I am with you, Lauren. Love me some Ryan Fitzpatrick. I've got a couple guys as well, but the one that I'll start with is Jalen Hurts. I feel like Jalen Hurts. I mean, at this point,
here's my surprise face, everybody. Jalen,
at this point, he might as well just start sponsoring it. The show has almost become a Jalen Hurts advertisement at this point. But I broke this down a while back. But for anyone that hasn't seen the show before, Rich Rebar, Lord Reeves on Twitter coined the Konami code quarterback phrase a few years back. And for anyone that doesn't understand that, what it is, rushing yards are worth more than passing yards. Rushing touchdowns are worth more than passing touchdowns. So the equivalent, if you're looking at it, if you're in a standard league, 40 rushing yards is equivalent to one passing touchdown. One rushing touchdown is equivalent to 1.5 passing touchdowns. So a lot of math for early on a Tuesday. But if you're following up until this point, Jalen Hurts averaged 68 rushing yards per game and 0.75 rushing touchdowns per game. You add those together, that's the equivalent of 2.7 passing touchdowns per game over the course of a season. That's an additional 43 passing touchdowns that you're getting just from Jalen Hurts' rushing ability. So, you hear about that Konami code all the time. And Alfred, a good friend of mine that runs the Campus to Canton, he just pointed this out a few days ago on Twitter. But it's almost at the point where having a guy like Cam Newton or Cordell Stewart or those rushing quarterbacks, back in the day, that would just give you a huge advantage. Now, it's almost like you need one of those guys just to maintain competitiveness because the pocket passers aren't going to be the QB1s anymore. Your Lamar Jacksons, Kyle Miller, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, maybe even Justin Fields, Trey Lance, once they get up to speed, those are going to be the guys that you're going to need if you want to stay competitive in fantasy football because the passing quarterbacks just aren't getting it done anymore and they don't provide that safe floor.
Yeah, I think the floor is the really good point to bring up there because you're going to have QB1s that have weeks that are pocket passers. But yeah, that the safety, I think definitely for sure. I agree with you. I did fact check you on my calculator while you were running off numbers because I don't do math. So my
And they
my
checked
my
out, right? The numbers
calculating
checked out.
fact check.
All
Bling,
right.
got it.
Love to hear it.
Nailed it.
Can I
Absolutely
talk
nailed it. I don't do math. Mm-mm.
Can I talk about one more quarterback of mine that I think is a
I
little bit,
suppose.
and I want to talk about this guy because I just submitted an article that should be published on Football Guys within the next few days here. And just to give you a little teaser, the title of this article is Lamar Jackson is still elite despite his early season woes. We saw it last year. When the season started, they were really trying to pigeonhole Lamar Jackson into being a pocket passer, which, first of all, I think the whole myth of him not being able to pass the ball is pretty easy to dispel once you look at his depth adjusted accuracy. We won't get into all that, but pretty much, they tried to turn him into a pocket passer last year. The problem is you need wide receivers if you want to be a good pocket passer. Marquise Brown was his number one. Mark Andrews was his number two, and the casual fans probably couldn't even name, other wide receivers on that team. So this year, I think that they have that same intention of turning him into a pocket passer. But this year they went out and they got Tylan Wallace, Rashad Bateman, Sammy Watkins, and they really beefed up that wide receiver room. So to start the season, Lamar Jackson was attempting 27 pass attempts per game. Back half of the season, he attempted 20 attempts per game. And that's when you saw his fantasy value go up when he started running the ball. So I think that having a more talented wide receiver core is going to open up more rushing opportunities for him. And I have Lamar Jackson as my QB1 heading into 2021. And I think right now, people that are, ranking him as the fifth, sixth, seventh quarterback coming off the board. That's not where he should
Crazy.
be.
Agreed.
Any other quarterbacks you wanted to talk about, or you think we hit most of them here? I know you did a deep poll with Fitzpatrick, which I like. Are there any other guys that you think are overlooked right now?
Yeah, I mean there are a few of them. Actually, I named one. I think Daniel Jones is going to have a pretty good year too. But the one I'm really going to highlight for this one is Ryan Fitzpatrick. But that's like a theme for this show. Just warning everybody. For me, they're deep dives on my players. They're pretty. I mean, they're could be classified more in the sleeper category, but they're also undervalued. I think so.
Hey,
I think it works.
It's all relative.
Especially my wide receiver. It's like, ooh, who?
It's all relative. And we're about to jump into some running backs, and you'll see, one of the running backs that I have is technically getting drafted in the first round, but I think that he should be getting drafted higher up in the first round. But let's throw this one to you, Lauren. Let's pivot from quarterbacks to running backs. Who is your most underrated running back that you think is a huge value right now?
I think this might be a little bit of low-hanging fruit because we have brought this guy up on the show before, and that is the Patriots running back, Damien Harris. I see him ranked way low, which I like as someone who is targeting him in drafts, but I feel like is that disrespect? I don't really know. But what kind of competition does he really have there? James White, who's really the PPR guy, is he even still there? I can't even remember. I don't pay attention to the Patriots with my Cam Newton love, can you tell? But then like Sony Michel, I mean, I think this is his backfield to lose. And I'm very excited about Damien Harris, especially at his value. So he's my undervalued, and probably favorite running back coming out of here. And you can get him late. Like I said, you could already have some elite running backs, especially if you're in a keeper league. And you can snag him a little bit later, and he's going to be the RB1 for the team. Yes, please. Gimme.
Yeah. I mean, Damien Harris, fantastic value. We talked about him a little bit last week, and we saw it in the handful of games where Damien Harris and Sony Michel played together. Damien Harris was absolutely the preferred back. He was the more effective back. He did everything better than Sony Michel did.
Yes, and just real quick, I forgot to add on there too. So he's ranked behind guys like Ronald Jones, who we will talk about a little bit later in the show. That's a committee with Leonard Fournette, almost admitted by his head coach. Myles Gaskin is another person he's ranked behind, I've seen in different places. So this could be an undisputed RB1 for that team with a little sprinkling, smatters here and there of some other players. But he has the potential and he has that opportunity, and he's going super late still. And he's ranked pretty low. So I really like that.
I'm with you. I love me some Damien Harris. I feel like he has been my go-to pick in best ball, like almost every single time. Like I like to smash running backs early, and then I'll grab a couple of wide receivers. And then when the 7th, 8th round comes around and Damien Harris is sitting there, it is an absolute no-brainer for me. But if we want to talk about the most undervalued guy, and this one's going to sound crazy because, like I said, if you're doing any drafts right now, he's going in the late first, early second round. But Austin Eckler, I still think people are too low on him. I mean, I understand that there's some trepidation right now because they have a brand new head coach in Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley comes from a defensive background. He was with the Bears and the Broncos, an outside linebacking coach. He was the Rams defensive coordinator. And now this is his first year as the Chargers head coach. But Austin Eckler has just done everything you want to see from an undrafted free agent. Came into the league with no draft capital whatsoever, looked like he was going to be the next Danny Woodhead, and has just had this meteoric rise through NFL ranks. When you look at some of his skills, you know, his burst scores in the 95th percentile, his agility scores in the 86th percentile. He ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. And one of the craziest things to me is that his catch rate, 81.2%, is the highest among all running backs. So like I said, when he was a rookie, it looked like he was going to be kind of in this Danny Woodhead role. He saw 35 targets, 47 carries. And then in 2019, we saw that holdout with Melvin Gordon. That's where Austin Eckler took over and exploded. And I feel like people forget how good he was then. So let me just highlight this really quickly. Through those first 5 weeks in 2019, Austin Eckler amassed 583 yards and was second in PPR scoring to just Christian McCaffrey. He was putting up 25.9 points per game. And then for the rest of the season, even when Melvin Gordon came back, Eckler still averaged 20.34 PPR points per game. When you look at his starts, because he hasn't started a lot, you know, he's dealt with some injuries. Melvin Gordon was in there. But if you're just looking at starts alone, since the start of 2019, Austin Eckler is the RB3 in PPR leagues. It's Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler. So he's only started 21 games throughout his career, but I think this is the year that we are going to see Austin Eckler with a full workload. We're going to see him getting the carries. We're going to see him getting the passing down work. And I think it would be crazy to make it out of the first round with Austin Eckler still on the board.
I love Austin Eckler, and I agree. I have heard people, I don't want to say besmirch because that's not exactly the term I think I want to use, but
besmirch Austin Eckler.
Don't you dare besmirch him. But I have heard, and again, not necessarily disrespect, just not as much love as I think is due for the amount of ceiling that he has and the potential that he has. But I do agree with you on that one. And I was just here looking up, what does his competition look like here? I mean, there's Justin Jackson is still there. The rookie Josh Kelly is going to be 1 year older. They got Larry Roundtree. This is kind of his, isn't it? Isn't this where he can really shine? And I feel like they tried to use him way too much as the line from scrimmage back, and they weren't targeting him as much as they really needed to until that ended up changing. I don't have the weeks in front of me, so I apologize for that. But yeah, if they can use him correctly, it'll be interesting to see what the new coaching staff is going to do with him. But I mean, I love Justin Herbert too, so I'm excited about the Chargers all the way around. But Austin Eckler,
that's a great thing to point out too, is he is tied to Justin Herbert. You're tied to one of the most explosive young quarterbacks in the league. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly risk with Austin Eckler. He might not get the goal line touches. He might not be a primary ball carrier, but just the floor that he's going to get from his pass catching upside alone is something that's pretty desirable. And, something that I feel like we're seeing with Austin Eckler now is something that we've seen with a lot of players in the past. And I feel like, especially this time of year, so many people are plugged hardcore into the dynasty community that they're worried about things like draft stock. But at a certain point, draft stock stops mattering. Aaron Jones was a 5th round pick, and he's one of the best guys in the league right now. And it took years for people to warm up to treating Aaron Jones like the RB1 that he is. Chris Carson drafted in the 6th round, and, people didn't want to put any respect on Chris Carson's name for years because Rashad Penny had higher draft capital than him. They still don't. And yeah, that's another guy I could talk about if we wanted to. Chris Carson, I think that he is grossly undervalued. And then Austin Eckler came in undrafted, and people still kind of, use that as a knock against him. And sure, there's reason for it. We saw Phillip Lindsay lose his role, James Robinson lose his role. But I think Austin Eckler has done everything that you'd want an undrafted guy to do to lock that role in. And it's not like he's a second-year guy that's still in jeopardy of losing his job. He's been with this team for 4 years now. He's an integral part of that offense. So Austin Eckler, if you took him as a top 5 running back, I have him as my 7th overall running back in PPR leagues. But, if somebody took him top 5, I want to judge him for it. I think that's a totally okay move to make.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Love it.
Let's talk about some wide receivers a little bit, because this is probably where we can get a little bit deeper. And I feel like this is also where there's the most discrepancy and deviation in people's rankings. I feel like with quarterbacks, you can't really go too far against the grain. People know what to expect. Running backs, everybody kind of has the same like top 25 just jumbled around a little bit. But receivers, this is where we see people consistently getting drafted in like the 9th, 10th, 11th round, putting up wide receiver 1 numbers. So let's go to receivers. Who's the guy that you have just got to have in 2021, Lauren?
This is such a deep dive, and I don't know if I'll put on that tag of gotta have him, but I would really like to have him, and I likely will get him, but it's Russell Gage. I know he's like the wide receiver 3 or 4 for the Falcons right now, but I really wanted to bring his name up to keep in mind with this whole Julio Jones situation, because he wants out. Then that leaves Calvin Ridley. Yeah, you have Hayden Hurst, newly drafted Kyle Pitts, but Russell Gage was utilized in that offense last year when Julio Jones was not on the field. And I really like him. You can get him super late, even if you just pick him up at the end of your drafts. He's someone that you can stash on your bench if you have the room and just kind of see how his role progresses, because undoubtedly Calvin Ridley will become the wide receiver 1 undisputed. I don't make any bones about that or try to argue with that whatsoever. But there is something to be said when you're talking about the 4th highest ranked passing volume team with Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons. There's going to be a lot of food going around for these mouths that are going to be wanting the football. And Russell Gage is one of them. And he's been used creatively before. I believe Julio Jones dropped a pass from him last year, and that resulted in, I believe, the loss of the game. But I really like him. He's someone I don't think anyone is really talking about when it comes to the after effects of what's going to happen when Julio Jones goes, or if Julio Jones goes. So for me, I'm looking at that. I'm not looking at the obvious. I want to keep my eyes on Russell Gage, and he's someone I'm going to have my eye on in drafts. I don't think anyone's really going to try to beat me to the punch on that, because he is such a deep dive sleeper, if you will. But I'm excited about him, and I'm curious to see what kind of rise he can make for this season. Maybe not as meteoric as Austin Eckler, but maybe. I like it.
Having a guy like Russell Gage, if that's a guy that you are into, and it's not like you have to like go crazy and spend a 2nd or 3rd round pick on him. You can wait and get Russell Gage in the 12th, 13th round. And if
literally in the last round of your drafts, you can probably get him.
Right. And if he ends up hitting and you have exposure on him across the board, I mean, that's league winning material right there. So
makes you look real smart.
That's a deep pull, and I like it.
It is.
I've got a couple guys that I could talk about here. Kenny Golladay is definitely one of them, but let me focus on Courtland Sutton, because we talked about Daniel Jones a little bit earlier, and I agree. Another one, if we're talking undervalued, just to rewind a second here, you mentioned Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is going, and it's like, I was just talking about how important
he was another one I was
running quarterback. But Matt Ryan, really, I mean, with the weapons that you see there, they pass the ball a lot. Matt Ryan, I think, is a fantastic option as well. But let me talk about Courtland Sutton just for a quick minute, because I absolutely love Courtland Sutton, and I think that he is probably my most underrated guy right now. And if you go to my Twitter page, I wrote an article that is titled Zero Wide Receiver Drafting and Players to Target, and the guy that is sitting on the featured image there is Courtland Sutton for very good reason. When I wrote that article, he was going in the 7th round. His ADP was in the 7th round. It has slowly started to creep up a little bit since then, which is expected. But I mean, this guy is truly an alpha receiver. 6'4", just top-notch speed, can jump out of the gym. He can make contested catches. He's got great hands. He's a fantastic route runner. There's really nothing not to like about Courtland Sutton. And then you go back and you look at what he did just 2 years ago. Obviously he didn't play last year because he suffered that week 1 ACL injury, which was terrible for anyone that invested draft stock in him. But his ADP right now is dramatically lower. It is dramatically lower than it was last year. And I don't understand why, because I think that he is still going to take over as that team's primary target. Sutton racked up 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns with Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, and Brandon Allen as his quarterbacks. Now, I don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is a huge upgrade, but if Teddy Bridgewater starts, whether it be Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, we know that he's still going to put up 1,000 yards. We also know that Aaron Rodgers wants to get traded and Denver is becoming. I am not exaggerating when I think that Courtland Sutton could be the wide receiver 1 if Aaron Rodgers ended up in Denver. So if you're
Wouldn't be
doing some early
surprised.
drafting leagues right now, I mean, there's a lot of smoke around that Aaron Rodgers situation. If he ends up moving to Denver, Cortland Sutton will be the new Devontae Adams. I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's just how good he is. Do we want to talk about Kenny Galladay a little bit too, or should we move on to tight ends?
I think we should talk about Kenny Galladay because I almost picked him as well. See, for anyone who's watching this and listening to us, first of all, thank you. Second of all, Dave and I, we do have some shared mojo when it comes to certain players. So Kenny Galladay was one that I was going to pick too. So please, by all means, let me know because I love this because I already brought up that I think Daniel Jones is a little undervalued as well. So you have the floor.
I will say Kenny Galladay was prior to the NFL draft when Kenny Galladay went to the New York Giants. I was beating the drum for Kenny Galladay wide receiver 1 season. Kadarius Toney getting drafted in the first round certainly messes that up just a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, Kenny Galladay is still the guy that you want to own on the New York Giants. He's going to be, again, I'm going to use this term talking about Cortland Sutton and Kenny Galladay, but he's going to be the alpha receiver. Last year, we heard about this hip injury, and I think that was just completely overblown as a way for him to get out of playing for a team that he didn't want to play for, that didn't want to pay him. I mean, that's Barry Sanders, Calvin Johnson. We can go on and on. That's a tale as old as time for Detroit Lions fans, is people not wanting to play for them. And that's what we saw last year. He was going out and practicing, saying that his hip was bothering him, and then not playing. Whatever. He screwed over a lot of people last year. Because of that, he is getting pushed down draft boards. Yes, me too. But because of that, he's getting pushed down draft boards now, and I think that he's going to be a fantastic value. Just when you look at what he's done, I mean, it's been a pretty short career. He didn't really do too much as a rookie. He had 2 great seasons after that, and then he was hurt most of last year. But when you look at his per 16 game averages, he was commanding 107 targets per season, over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. And that was with Matt Stafford and, some other decent pass catchers, Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkins, and some other guys competing for targets. Now I think that he is going to be the de facto wide receiver 1 in New York. I think that his ability to get down the field and just lay his body on the line to make those contested catches works out perfectly with Daniel Jones, who really likes to throw that contested ball. So I think that Kenny Galladay, I don't know if he's going to be quite a wide receiver 1, but I think a high-end wide receiver 2 is where he should be getting drafted. And right now he's being valued below that. So, and
I like how you brought up the contested catches. That is something that Kenny Galladay excels at. And I think that's only going to help Daniel Jones as well. So it's insane what Kenny Galladay is capable of doing. I mean, he did it in Detroit. Come on.
Daniel Jones, he's not a Tom Brady. He's not going to be putting these super accurate passes on the money. He's a little bit more like the guy that we started the show talking off about, a little more like Ryan Fitzpatrick, where he's just kind of, when he's in trouble, he'll close his eyes and just chuck a ball downfield and hope that his receiver can make the play. And Kenny Galladay can make that play. And Drew Lock is kind of the same way too, which is why, I think that Cortland Sutton is going to be okay, whether it's Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater. But I think that Drew Lock helps Cortland Sutton's outlook just a little bit because he isn't afraid to throw that contested ball.
Nope.
All right. Let's wrap it up now. We talked about quarterbacks. We talked about running backs. We talked about wide receivers. That leaves kickers. No, I'm kidding. We are going to talk about some tight ends.
Jason Sanders.
Really, though? I mean, he had a
Tyler Bass. Let's go.
I don't know if I prepped too much for kicker talk. We could
yeah, neither did I. How I knew those names off the top of my head, I don't know.
I'm still in a few kicker leagues. They get a lot of
almost all of mine are kicker leagues. I'm actually in a handful that are not.
People don't like them. I was talking with Marcus Grant from NFL Network last week. We'll go off on a little tangent here.
Ooh,
and he was saying he was saying that he loves kickers, though. And he was saying, he's like, we've gotten to the point where we have pretty much figured out fantasy football. There are so many analysts and projections and rankings out there that everybody's kind of playing the same game at this point. Like, you might reach for a guy a couple spots early or something like that. And what he was saying, he's like, I remember when I was younger and there was just randomness in the game. Like, you'd draft a quarterback in the first round and you'd pick players because you thought that they had a fun name. And then guys like CJ Huzmanzada would end up blowing out. And he's like, and kickers kind of bring that randomness back to the game. So
it's true. Yeah.
That was listening. He's like, I like kickers because it takes, it adds a little element of fun rather than making it a fixed game, if you will. But
I'm in a league where kickers score high, which is fun.
Yeah, I'm in one too. If you hit a my hometown league, if you hit a 50+ yard field goal, it's 6 points. If you miss an extra point, it's -5.
Ooh, ours is only -2. Woo!
Stakes are high. Stakes are
That
really high in
is.
this league. Yeah, if you miss
Woo.
anything within 30 yards, you miss 3 points. 30 to 40 yards, you miss 2 points. 50 plus, you miss 1. But
Wow.
makes it fun. Makes it a lot of fun. And then you have these kickers putting up 25-point weeks and outscoring your RB1. Makes
I
definitely a
love
little bit
it.
of randomness. But no, we're not going to talk about kickers, even though we just did for 3
Even though
minutes.
we
We're
just
going
did.
to talk about tight ends. So who is your tight end that you're most excited about heading into 2021?
Well, okay, this was another situation where I had two, and it was really hard for me to pick one. But since I already talked about Washington with Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm going to table Logan Thomas, who I'm very excited about. I'm very high on Logan Thomas, but a lot of people are. There's a player that I don't want us to forget. Again, another deep dive here, kind of like the Russell Gage, but Blake Jarwin. He got hurt very early last year, and he has the opportunity with Dak back in the Cowboys offense to come to fruition like we had kind of hoped last year, but unfortunately that whole year was just a hot mess. So I like Blake Jarwin. He's a super sneaky late round tight end that you can pick up. He gives you a ton of value. And all the buzz is really around like CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper and Ezekiel Elliott. Well, there's a tight end position for the Cowboys too, and a very good quarterback when he can stay healthy, which is Dak Prescott. So don't forget about Blake Jarwin. He's still there. And the tight end landscape's a dumpster fire. So why not?
Yeah, I am taking a look right now because I am a huge Jarwin fan. So I'm
I
happy
love
you
Blake
brought him up.
Jarwin.
Looking right now in the Football Guys rankings, and Blake Jarwin is currently the tight end 18, which I think is about where he belongs. But that he definitely also has the opportunity to surpass that. And just recently, they were saying that he is recovering from his injury well, and he should be back next year. And I'm with you. Yeah, I love me some Blake Jarwin. He's another guy. I talked about best ball a little bit earlier, but
Yes.
Blake Jarwin is one of these guys that I've been getting in all of my best ball leagues. And what I'm doing, if I miss out on the Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, George Kittle, if I miss out on that tier, I'm not spending early picks on Kyle Pitts and Dallas Goedert and Noah Fant. I'm waiting until the final rounds, and the two guys I'm getting are Blake Jarwin and Anthony Firkser. Anthony
Yeah.
Firkser is another guy that I just think is going to blow up. It's not that Jonnu Smith commanded a ton of targets last year, or any year for that matter, in Tennessee, but Anthony Firkser kind of started taking over as the pass-catching tight end last year, even when Jonnu Smith was there. Jonnu Smith started staying in line a little bit more and blocking a little bit more while Firkser was going out there and catching the ball. They lost Jonnu Smith, they lost Corey Davis, and they brought in Josh Reynolds, but I think that Anthony Firkser is somebody that can easily see 80 to 100 targets this year. As much as I'd love to see AJ Brown see 350 targets, it's not going to happen. I still think that he's going to see somewhere near 200, but they need a second pass catching option.
They do.
And I think that Anthony Firkser is going to surpass Josh Reynolds as that number 2 option. So love me some Anthony Firkser. But while we're on the topic of tight ends, this is something we've talked about before, that like if you can't get one of those top tier guys, it's probably better just to wait. And there are a lot of guys when you're looking at the tight end landscape that I think could really end up outperforming where they're at. Like I said, Blake Jarwin at 18, Jonnu Smith at 16, even Austin Hooper at 21, Anthony Firkser is down here at 20, Jared Cook, who just got signed by the Chargers. They lost Hunter Henry, who has been a great player. Jared Cook has had years of proven
Could have been
success.
my pick.
And well, let's talk about Jared Cook a little bit, because right now he's ranked at 23rd on Football Guys consensus rankings and tied to Justin Herbert. Hunter Henry's gone. Jared Cook for the last few years has been a touchdown machine, whether he's been in Oakland or St. Louis or New Orleans. So yeah, Jared Cook's another guy that I'm excited about.
I am too. I am very excited about Jared Cook. It's just like what you were saying, right? Hunter Henry is no longer with the Chargers, and I understand that it's not Phillip Rivers who loves to target tight ends and whatever. It's Justin Herbert, but still, Justin Herbert will sling the rock, and they need other pass catchers besides just Keenan Allen. I love this, and I'm excited. And we're talking about guys that are very streamable. So whereas Blake Jarwin may not be, sorry, I got a bug flying in my face. He may not be my season-long guy, but he's someone, if I have the room, I'd love to stash him or pick him up when there's a really juicy matchup for tight ends. So but now that we talk about it, I'm actually kind of excited about tight ends this year.
Yeah, and I feel like we fall into this trap every single year where we're like, we got to reach for those mid-tier guys, and they very rarely pay off. Last year, when people were taking Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, Noah Fant, those guys didn't pay off. It was the guys that you waited for and took at the very end of your draft that ended up really outperforming their draft capital, and I think that's going to happen again this year. But we Jared Cook, I'm looking right now at his last 3 years. The guy's been a touchdown machine. He had 7 touchdowns last year. He had 9 the year before, and he had 6 the year before that, which is pretty solid for a tight end. And I'm not sure if
touchdown dependent, though. He doesn't necessarily have a lot of the yards and the receptions. So in order to get some good points out of Jared Cook, you need a touchdown from him. However, he is gigantic. He's got big hands. He's got a great catch radius, and that's somebody that you can target in the end zone, which is exactly what they used Hunter Henry for in the Chargers offense last year. So he has big shoes to fill, but he's a big guy. So I'm in.
And something that I have mentioned on a few shows in the past, and I don't know if I've said it on this one before or not, but it's just how close tight ends are once you get out of that top tier of tight ends. So when you're looking at tight end 4 to tight end 18, the difference last year between tight end 4 and tight end 18 was 3 20-yard touchdown receptions. That's it. That's it. Had the tight end 18 caught an extra 3 20-yard touchdown receptions, they would have surpassed Mark Andrews and been the tight end 3. It's crazy how close it is. So, I think that the best bet for tight ends is just to wait, get 2 or 3 guys late at the end of your draft and hope that one of them ends up panning out, because tight ends are tough. They're not fun. I think I prefer kickers over tight ends at this point.
But Tyler Bass, let's go.
If you are into rankings and you're watching shows like this one, you're probably a pretty serious fantasy player. It is May, and we're talking fantasy football. So you want to win, but consistently winning at fantasy football is challenging, and it takes a lot of time. So you need to get yourself a Footballguys premium subscription that'll give you an edge and help make winning decisions in a little bit less time. And even better yet, our way of saying thanks to all of these serious players like you is we are offering our early bird discount that is available right now. Just head to footballguys.com, click the orange button in the upper right that says join now, and that will take you to our early bird discounted pricing. We will do the work and you will do the winning. Lauren, we had some good news this week. Are you ready to dive in and dissect some news? All right.
Born ready. Let's go.
I'm going to start with the one that is probably the most polarizing and hottest topic of everything that happened this week. And I love it. But Lions' new offensive coordinator said that he sees newly acquired Jamaal Williams as an A-back. What does that story tell us about DeAndre Swift heading into 2021?
It's not good news. Not good news, Dave. Not good news at all. So, yeah. DeAndre Swift was also a target. I don't want to say machine, but he saw targets. And like the A back is kind of like a slot back, if you will. And you can line up as a slot receiver. This is kind of what Jamaal Williams is going to be doing. I don't like it. I love DeAndre Swift. So this news does not make me happy because this has running back by committee written all over it. And I don't like it. So if I want a piece of that, or if I have to have a piece of that, depending on how my draft is going, I may start leaning more Jamaal Williams now for the value instead of DeAndre Swift, who has the explosiveness. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Boo, go away. Garbage.
It's a tough situation for people that are really into DeAndre Swift. And I feel like this was such a headline that caused attention, because it's not like he's saying, Jamaal Williams is the preferred back and DeAndre Swift is the backup. I think what he means, you kind of hit on. The A-back is the bigger guy that can run between the tackles, better pass blocker, which is what we expected. But I still feel like people are trying to suppress this story as much as possible because it is ruining their narrative on DeAndre Swift. And I'm just being honest, but we saw this last year. Anthony Lynn is now the offensive coordinator in Detroit after being the offensive coordinator last year in Los Angeles with the Chargers. And we saw Kalen Ballage.
Was he the head coach? Was he offensive coordinator or was he head coach?
Oh, I'm sorry. He was the head coach.
Head coach. You're just making sure, because I get those confused all the time. So I was like, wait a minute. Did I just write my article wrong? Because I probably did.
Thank you for getting that. But what we saw was Kalen Ballage. We've made some jokes about Kalen Ballage in the past and his 1.8 yards per carry in Miami. But Kalen Ballage saw 39% of the team's snaps last year when he was healthy. And Kalen Ballage is kind of like Jamaal Williams, where he's that big-bodied A-back pass blocker.
Can I interrupt you really quick? Jamaal Williams is better than Kalen Ballage, and Kalen Ballage became fantasy relevant. This is bad news. But continue with what you're saying because you're proving this point. And I'm not saying Kalen Ballage is bad. I'm saying Jamaal Williams is better than Kalen Ballage. This is not good. Continue.
So I love DeAndre Swift's talent. I think that he's a great talent, and I think that he is a great pass catcher, which is exactly what you want when you are playing fantasy football, especially in PPR leagues. But when we've seen teams that are able to have two running backs that are able to remain relevant, the three that come to mind for me are the Chargers when they had Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, the Saints when they had Alvin Kamara, and whether it was either Latavius Murray or Mark Ingram, they were able to coexist with each other. And now it's Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Those are powerhouse offenses with good quarterbacks and good head coaches. We're talking about the Jared Goff-led Detroit Lions. I don't know if they're going to have enough scoring opportunities to support two running backs. So, DeAndre Swift, if your expectation for DeAndre Swift is to be a high-end RB2, I think that that's a realistic expectation. But the people that are out here thinking that DeAndre Swift is going to be top 5, some people are even saying top 3, I don't think it's going to happen. And this story right here is kind of the nail in the coffin for those truthers.
Yeah, I agree. And what worries me is that people who are drafting, for, people who are not watching shows like this, who aren't as cool as y'all who are watching this show. But when you go to those home leagues and like the bar leagues and, those places that you draft, they may not understand this about DeAndre Swift. And he is going to go too early, which means the appropriate place where he can go maybe a little bit later, because there is kind of a committee situation that we have now. He's already off the board, which does kind of stink. But if he is available at that right draft price, if you will, it's something I would still consider, but you have to know that going into it. But I think he's just going to fly off the board too fast because not everyone's going to realize what's happening in Detroit besides just, not good things.
And, if the theme of this show is undervalued players, overlooked players, whatever you want to call it, Jamaal Williams right now is getting drafted in the
I almost brought him up
round.
too.
10th to 12th round for Jamaal Williams, and that's a great value. But I think that we'll see that start to creep up as the summer progresses. Anyway, another running back story that I want to talk on, and I feel like this guy just keeps consistently getting brought up in the news, but it's because it's such a peculiar situation. Chase Edmonds said that he is, quote, ready to run through a darn wall. His comments make it seem like he is going to be the team's lead back. So I feel like I have to ask once again. We talked about this on the first show. We talked about it on the second show. We made it 2 full weeks without talking about Chase Edmonds, but his name is back in the news. What are we expecting now? I mean, what are we doing with this backfield?
This hasn't really changed too much for me. My opinion on what I believe that backfield is going to look like with James Conner. So it just doesn't surprise me. And if anything, this just kind of makes me lean maybe a little bit more. This is really Chase Edmonds' backfield to lose to James Conner, but I just don't think James Conner is going to have the kind of impact I think that Chase Edmonds is going to have. So this just solidifies my previous thought process on this whole thing, as opposed to change anything really, if that makes any sense. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I agree. I think he could run through a wall. He's ready to prove it. I think he's tired of being the RB2. He wants to prove that he's the RB1.
Yeah, I feel like, hopefully some clarity comes out, but we have seen Cliff Kingsbury really screw with running backs in the past, coming out right before the game and saying David Johnson is healthy and he's going to be the lead back, and then giving him one snap and benching him for the rest of the game. I mean, we've seen Cliff Kingsbury play some running back mind tricks when it comes to fantasy football.
I had forgotten about that, and you just gave me like PTSD. Remembering that game. That was terrible.
It was like a week or two before playoffs too.
It was awful.
Yeah. I had just traded for David Johnson. I can't relive all that. It was brutal. But I'm kind of with you. I want to see Chase Edmonds do well. My fear is that he just can't hold up for a full 17-game season as the team's lead back. But I think that he makes a great target because we know James Conner is going to miss time. And when he does miss time, I think that Chase Edmonds has proven time and time again that he is able to step up to the plate and perform when he needs to be called on.
And the value you can get him in the draft, he's one of those perfect guys that you can have on your bench and you can plug in as a flex. You can plug in as an RB2 if you need to, depending on what his situation looks like. So he's one of those guys I'm keeping my eye on. And if the price is right, I'm going to have him on my team.
So we just talked about Cliff Kingsbury back in 2019, how he screwed over a lot of fantasy managers. And I'm going to read a quote right now from another guy who really, really likes to do that. And this quote itself actually alludes to it just a little bit. Bruce Arians, head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a long quote, but I'm going to read it all out because I feel like you need the whole thing to really
context.
Exactly. When asked about Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, he said they're both going to play. They're both so talented and they bring so much to the table. Hopefully, if they're both healthy, they are splitting time. I know fantasy doesn't like that, but those two guys, I mean, Rojo is one of the best runners I've ever been around. Lenny had that great run in the playoffs. He showed why they drafted him or what they drafted him for in the top 5. So we're blessed to have this group of backs. With Keyshawn Vaughn and Gio Bernard, it's a hell of a group. End quote. What are we supposed to do with this backfield?
Stop it right now.
4 sentences, 4 running back names.
STAHP. Stop it. Like what? Lenny and Keyshawn and Gio, we're besties. We're going to go out to the bar after this and grab a beer, then maybe run some laps. Like, stop it, Bruce. I can't. No. I'm sorry. Fantasy relevance, Keyshawn and Gio, if Lenny and Rojo get hurt, maybe, whatever. But I think this is going to be a very similar situation to what we saw last year between Leonard Fournette and with Ronald Jones. Maybe even more confusing between those two players. Fantasy doesn't like this, Bruce. Fantasy hates this. But, we also do have at least some numbers we can go back and look at from last year to see if we can maybe kind of get some clarity on this situation. But if it's up to me, I'm staying as far away from this backfield as humanly possible because I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you at this point. Like, I've got a lot.
Right, that was very vehement of me.
It was.
I had a strong opinion.
and I know this is a redraft show, but when it comes to Dynasty, I have a lot of Ronald Jones in Dynasty, and this is something that worries me a little bit. Both of the guys have draft capital, so if you're a draft capital guy, they've both got it tied to them. And I think that when you look at the just pure running abilities, I think Ronald Jones is much better than Leonard Fournette. I mean, we saw it last year. He beat him in just about every single metric when it came to running the ball. But unfortunately, running backs need to do a lot more than just run the ball. They need to block, they need to catch, and most importantly, they need to hold on to the football, which Leonard Fournette does a lot better. Yes. And Leonard Fournette does all of those small things much better than Ronald Jones does. So, yeah, I mean, we've seen it time and time again. If there's one guy that hates fantasy football more than Cliff Kingsbury, it is Bruce Arians. And yeah, as great as this offense is going to be, and as talented as Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn and Gio Bernard and Ronald Jones are, I think it might be best just to kind of avoid this backfield unless you have a very high risk tolerance.
Yes. And unless you really like Pepto-Bismol, # not a sponsor. But yeah, I would stay away.
So last week we talked about a bunch of guys that were on the mend coming from injuries because OTAs were starting up, and we heard this guy is going to be playing, this guy's not going to be playing, yada yada yada. But we had one come that I feel like we have to talk about because he is the best young player in the league right now, Patrick Mahomes. We got news that that he is ahead of schedule regarding the toe injury that he suffered last year, and that he will be back for camp. Are you worried about a toe injury for Patrick Mahomes, or is this just kind of a non-story?
Nah, I'm not that worried. No, the coach speak abounds. Everyone's always ahead of schedule. If everyone's ahead of schedule, then your schedules are wrong. Like, fix your stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, neither am I. Let's just skip that one. We don't have to stick on it too much. I feel like, it's
we can address it. We know it. We don't care.
So let's talk about another one then. And this doesn't really affect 2021 really too much, but I want to talk about Russell Wilson a little bit because Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated said that he is on his final contract with Seattle. That contract expires in 2023. Do you think that Russell Wilson and the Seahawks are going to be able to mend their relationship between now and the end of the 2023 season? Or do you think that Russell Wilson is actually going to be gone once his contract is up?
I think, oh man, I don't know. I can see it both ways, but the way things stand now, I know you and I have similar notes about this, but he's just not one of those guys that comes out and spouts off on social media to create a buzz. That's just not his personality. He's never done that throughout his entire career. Peter Schrager brought that up on Good Morning Football as well. So there's some fire here behind the smoke in Seattle. So would I be surprised if he were no longer on the team in 2023? No. Would I be surprised if he wants a trade? No, which he did say he wanted to trade, right? He started lifting off Tampa. I don't even know the full details about what that story is. Agent, that's right. There was some kerfuffle about it. But like, I don't know. He's just not one of those guys that comes out and does it. So I think for the short term, for what I'm most concerned about, which is redraft in 2021, he will be back, I believe, and it's going to be fine. But what happens in 2023, I'm not sure. But that for dynasty purposes, I will keep my eye on that storyline for the pieces that are not necessarily for Russell Wilson himself in dynasty, but for those pieces that are around him. And if he's out of Seattle, what does that mean for someone like DK Metcalf? So I'm not sure, but they better figure it out. Like these coaches better start understanding that their quarterbacks are good and they might need them to win.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, like he never he seems very drama adverse. You never see him going to the media.
Unless there was that Mr. Unlimited. Did you see that on social media? That was dramatic and not okay.
Yeah. I just shared that a couple of weeks ago actually on Twitter.
Unlimited.
No. Just a reminder that this video
don't ever do that.
It actually it was bad. But Sigmund Bloom. Shout out Football Guys. Sigmund Bloom, the host of the Audible on the couch. You should know who he is by now. But when I was on his show, we were talking about Russell Wilson a little bit. And he just said something that I feel like I'm going to remember. And he was like, Russell Wilson is kind of in that Tom Brady tier of players, not so much talent wise, but just that their life is bigger than football. Football is just something that they're doing and it's a part of their life. But their goals, their plan, their life has something bigger to it than football. And I feel like that's kind of it. And Russell Wilson, he's always been a stand-up guy, respected by other athletes and former players, whatever it may have you. I could see this, getting ironed out between now and 2023, because just on the surface, Russell Wilson seems like a very reasonable, easy to talk to guy.
Yeah, he does. Actually, Adam Rank had something to say about Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson remembered his name and he was really impressed with it. That's just the kind of guy Russell Wilson is, a fantasy guy. Talking to Adam Rank, the fantasy guy. I know. Look at us. We are popular. We're kind of a big deal, in case y'all didn't know. But yeah, it just seems it's the same thing. It's like he's going to do what's best for the team, but he's also going to do what's best for himself. And yeah, that doesn't feel like a similar situation to what we see going on in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know. I hope they work it out.
All right, I'm going to throw one to you real quickly, and I think I know what your answer is going to be. I think you already know how I feel. We've done enough shows that I think we kind of, know our trenches that we're in at this point.
Without even looking at the show sheet, I know exactly what question this is. Continue. And my answer is very short.
Cam Newton has been working out has been working out with a throwing coach and is working on rebuilding his fundamentals. Are you starting to warm up on him?
No.
All right.
No, Cam Newton. No.
All right. I have to at least plug a little bit of Cam Newton love in here really quickly, because this kind of blew my mind. So, we obviously, his shoulder hasn't been the same. He injured his shoulder back in 2018, and it's something that seems like it's sticking with him. Like his throwing motion is just not the same. And the reason I wanted to highlight this story is, first of all, I saw a video that really piqued my interest, and I'll send it to you. Mike Rice, the beat reporter for the Patriots, shared it. But Cam Newton looks like a completely different player throwing the ball right now. He doesn't have that pushing movement that he had anymore. He is holding the ball up tight, throwing from behind his ear. He really shortened up his release. So I will say he looked different. And granted, this was one clip that was a second and a half long, but I said, wow, that. I didn't realize that was Cam Newton.
Yeah, how many takes did it take to get that?
Could have been quite a few, but I'm trying to have an open mind. I'm an eternal optimist.
I put so much shade on poor Cam Newton. I hope he does well. I think Cam Newton's a great player. It's just for fantasy purposes, I'm staying as far away as possible, and that's exactly what I'm going to help other people try to do. But if you want to go for Cam Newton, you go for it.
Here's the last thing I'll say. Early on in his career, we knew that Cam Newton
is it the last thing you'll say about Cam Newton? I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about him again
on today's show. The last thing I'll say on today's show. We saw his average depth of target just drop year over year as the hits piled up, the injuries piled up, whatever. But in 2019, or I'm sorry, 2018, which was the last full season he played without an injury before last year, he set a career high for completion percentage. He followed it up last year, didn't set the career high, but was second best of his career. And he also tied his career low for interceptions. So I think what you can kind of deduce from that is that Cam Newton has a better understanding of the game and defenses now. And if he's able to get his throwing motion back and can put a little zip on the ball again, he's a very likely candidate to bounce back this year. But,
he could be.
Mac Jones is still going to be breathing down his neck.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk about. We'll just lump these both into one question because we're running low on time. But two prominent quarterbacks that we're not seen at all at camp this week: Aaron Rodgers and Deshaun Watson. They're both standing very firmly in their trade requests and not joining the team at camp. Is it time to start panicking about either of these guys?
I think you've probably already passed the panic moment, and you're just still panicking from months ago. It's concerning, yes, but not surprising. Houston is a hot mess. That is a mess. So I have no idea what is going to happen with that whole situation. And Green Bay has no more clarity to it whatsoever. So it just becomes more real now, as opposed to like, oh, he's serious. We knew he was serious. It's just becoming, okay, yeah, this is real. It's happening. So something needs to get figured out quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely starting to look a little bit more and more concerning, but we haven't talked about the Deshaun Watson scenario much. And it's something that I don't really like talking about that much because it's a very touchy subject. And there's a lot that we don't really, you don't want to say anything that could be offensive or come back to blow up in your face. But the one thing I will say is that we heard that Watson and his attorney were trying to settle outside of court. And they said that they were confident that they'd be able to be able to settle outside of court. And then yesterday, when he didn't show up to OTAs, Ian Rappaport tweeted that he wasn't there, and the reason for him not being there was that he still wanted to be traded. So, the fact that they're not even talking about the allegations and they're saying that he's not there because of the trades, that makes me think that there is maybe a little bit more of a chance that he is traded or does play in 2021. But I mean, right now he's just got to kind of be kryptonite. You'd be crazy.
Deshaun Watson. Tough. That's tough for any.
Whether it's the trade or the allegations or whatever. There's a lot of reasons that Deshaun Watson might not be on a field in 2021.
Yeah, here's my 10-foot pole. I'm not touching it with it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at too. I know everyone right now in Dynasty is trying to trade away Deshaun Watson, but there really aren't a lot of people buying either. So it's a weird situation with a lot of question marks. But let's stay on the Texans for just a minute because the Texans said that Nico Collins will be relied on heavily as a rookie. How are you feeling about Nico Collins in redraft leagues in 2021?
No, thanks. I don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Brandon Cooks is still there. There's other people there. Nope. I don't buy it.
Yeah. I think if we knew Deshaun Watson was going to be the quarterback, I'd probably be buying into it a little bit. But I want to point this out because Mike Tagliere tweeted this out a few days ago, right after the draft, because everyone was going crazy about Nico Collins. Everyone was going crazy about Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I'll just read it word for word. He said there have been 35 wide receivers drafted in the 4th round of the NFL draft over the last 8 years. Not a single one of them has finished as a top 50 fantasy wide receiver in their rookie season.
Yeah.
So that's just something to think about, opportunity. It kind of feels last year like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where a lot of people didn't even have him ranked high before the draft. And then he landed in Kansas City and everyone was like, well, let's go crazy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's in this great opportunity. And it blew up in a lot of people's faces. So I could see something similarly happening with Nico Collins this year.
Agreed. I'm not buying it.
Let's wrap up with the Football Guys Spotlight. This is something that we do every single week, and I will take it this week. And this one is kind of random. It's somebody that I just connected with very recently, but Colt Shroeder is a guy that reached out to me and asked me to come on his show. I didn't know who he was. He told me it was a Buffalo Bills podcast, and I said, oh, I'm a Bears fan. I don't even know why you're having me on. But anyway, I just went with it. I joined the show, and Colt Shroeder is a young guy that is just so personable, so much fun, ran a great and professional show. And while he's been doing a lot of Buffalo Bills specific stuff, his show is called the Buffalo Nerd, he's starting to get more and more into the fantasy community, and he's somebody that I would definitely recommend checking out because he's just great on camera. You can find him on Twitter at Colt_Shroeder. That's at COLT_SCHROEDER. Definitely check out Colt Shroeder.
And I'll be on his show briefly or soon. Yes, I'll be on his show soon as well. Yeah.
All the more reason to follow Colt and check it out. No, seriously, he is a ton of fun. And
so nice.
He wraps in a lot of personal questions too, which I like. You know, books I like to read and charities that I support and hobbies that I like having. And yeah, he will ask you about books that you read. He'll ask about favorite authors. And, you know, he's a really, really genuinely nice person to talk to.
I love
I like when shows get away from football conversation a little bit. I can only talk about takes and players and rankings so much. It's nice when somebody asks me like, hey, what book made you want to become a writer? And it's like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that before. So definitely Colt Shroeder, great guy. Be sure to check him out. Before we sign off, though, is there anything that you wanted to talk about? We got a few minutes left here.
No, I need football. That's what I mean. I know I'm going to say this every single time, but we're getting so close to football. It's like we're talking about undervalued players today. And I think I can say this, right? We're going to be talking about overvalued players next week. So I'm excited about that too, but we're getting into real football, which is so exciting. So this is the kind of the time where you can sit back with your popcorn and watch all the drama unfold. And then before you know it, it's going to be preseason. Like, this is super exciting. This year has so much of a different feel to it because we're coming out of the pandemic. We are getting back to some sort of normality through thick and thin. Every day we get a little bit closer and closer. Like, we were watching the PGA Championship. And Phil Mickelson was almost like mobbed on the 18th hole. And it was like, people, it was like, wow. And then you're seeing fans in hockey stadiums for the playoffs right now. I don't want to talk about the St. Louis Blues. We're out, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's going to be a really fun year that is going to be celebrating what it's like to be a fan of football, whether you play fantasy or not. It's just so exciting.
And the buildup with you closing every show saying, I can't wait for football. I mean, the week before, like our final preseason show of the week is, I just expect you to be screaming that. Like
my hair's going to be pink. It's going to be like, it's going to be nuts. I'm going to have pom-poms and I'm going to be like, oh my God. Yeah.
Well, be sure to tune in next week. Lauren already said it. We talked about the most undervalued guys today. And next week we will be talking about the most overvalued. Can I give you one quick teaser?
Oh, yes.
Derrick Henry is going to be my running back, most overvalued guy heading into 2021. I know you hate to hear it. I'll give you the full scoop on it next week. But thank you for tuning into Football Guys Show, 2-Point Stance. You can find us live on Twitter every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to subscribe to the Football Guys YouTube page for the replay every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. youtube.com/footballguystv. And on that YouTube page, you can also find the rest of the Football Guys Show, the Audible, the Mailbag Show with myself and Troy, which comes out every Wednesday evening, the Dynasty Show with Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara, the Dynasty Newsletter Show with Adam Wilde and Chris Allen, the Power Grid, and I think we might even have some more coming out.
That's amazing. Look at us go. Yes.
Look at us go. Be sure to check it out, youtube.com/footballguystv. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.